The library breathed with its usual comforting stillness. Sunlight streamed in long, golden rectangles through tall windows, falling across the neat rows of shelves and painting stripes on the carpet. Dust motes drifted lazily in the beams of light, caught in the quiet air. Somewhere in the children's section, a page turned, and the faint hum of the air conditioner blended with the soft shuffle of distant footsteps. At a large oak table near the circulation desk, a black man in his early 50s sat surrounded by books and notes. His presence was steady, unhurried, the kind of calm that seemed to belong in a library more than anywhere else. He wore a pressed shirt with sleeves rolled neatly to the elbows, reading glasses perched low on his nose. A small stack of returned books rested at his side, their spines aligned with meticulous care, and in front of him lay a thick binder filled with schedules and notes. He worked with quiet precision, making notations in the margins of a report, occasionally glancing up at the front desk as if keeping one eye on the rhythm of the room. Every so often, a patron would approach the desk to ask a question, and he would look up with a small smile, observing the exchange, ready to step in if needed. This was his domain, though he never announced it with words. The weight of his presence came from how naturally he belonged, as much a fixture of the library as the shelves themselves. Children tiptoed past with parents, clutching picture books to their chests. A college student, earbuds dangling from one ear, scribbled furiously at a nearby study table. The man adjusted his glasses and carefully checked off another task on his list. For him, it was an ordinary afternoon, tending to the quiet heartbeat of the library, guiding it with patience and care. But not everyone saw it that way. From across the room, a pair of eyes fixed on him, narrow, suspicious, watching not his work, but his very presence. Karen had just walked in, tote bag slung over her shoulder, and the sight of the man at the oak table made her pause. Her lips pursed, her steps slowed. She didn't see a professional at work. She didn't see someone who belonged. Already in her mind, she had decided he shouldn't be there, and she intended to do something about it. Karen's footsteps clicked against the tile as she crossed the open space, her tote bag swinging sharply at her side. The hushed atmosphere of the library seemed to dim around her, the way quiet does before a storm. Her eyes stayed fixed on the man at the oak table, as though his very presence was an offense she couldn't ignore. He didn't notice her at first. He was too absorbed in his work, sliding a note into a file, checking the circulation statistics on a printed spreadsheet, adjusting the stack of books so they lined up neatly. His movements carried the ease of routine, the familiarity of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. But Karen saw none of that. To her, the binder was suspicious, the books too many, his place at the table too permanent. She slowed as she drew near, her lips tightening, her chin lifting with practiced indignation. "Excuse me," she said, her voice louder than the space required. Heads lifted from nearby tables. A student glanced up from his laptop, frowning at the sudden disruption. The man looked up calmly, pushing his glasses slightly higher on his nose. His expression was polite, open. "Good afternoon," he said, his tone gentle, as if greeting any patron. Karen's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you doing here?" He blinked, slightly surprised at the bluntness of the question, but his answer came without hesitation. "I'm working," he said simply, his voice low and even. Karen let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Working? At this table? With those books? I've been coming to this library for years, and I've never seen you here before. Where's your library card?" The words carried across the room, drawing more eyes. A mother in the children's section stiffened and quietly shushed her child, while two students exchanged wary glances. The man closed his binder gently, folding his hands on top of it. "Ma'am, I do in fact belong here. Is there something I can help you with?" Her brows shot up. "Help me?" "Number. I want to know why you're sitting here like you own the place. People don't just walk in and take over a table like that." The tension thickened, rippling out across the library's silence. A librarian at the front desk lifted her head, sensing the edge in Karen's tone, but staying still, watching. The man remained calm, though his voice took on a firmer edge. "I assure you, I have every right to be here." Karen's eyes hardened. She didn't believe him. She didn't want to. And she wasn't done pressing. Karen planted her tote bag firmly on the edge of the oak table, the thud startling in the quiet space. A few students glanced up from their laptops, their eyes flicking nervously between her and the man. The library was not a place for raised voices, but Karen didn't seem to care. "You can't just sit here like this," she declared, her voice rising above the natural hush. "This is a public library. People are supposed to use the resources, not camp out and pretend like they run the place." The man looked at her steadily, his calm composure unbroken. He adjusted his glasses and said evenly, "I'm not camping out. I'm reviewing inventory and schedules. That's part of my work." Karen snorted loudly, shaking her head. "Work? Don't lie to me. You don't work here. You're just hanging around, taking up space, and making this place uncomfortable for everyone else. I've seen this before. People coming in, pretending, acting like they belong," her words carried, drawing more stares. "Drawing more." A child whispered to her mother, "Why's that lady yelling?" The mother shushed her, but her eyes stayed fixed on the scene. The man closed his binder again, carefully, his patience clear but tested. "Ma'am, I've told you, I belong here. Please lower your voice. This is a place for quiet study." Karen laughed, sharp and derisive. "Quiet study? Don't tell me the rules. I know how libraries work, and I know when someone doesn't belong." She jabbed a finger toward his binder. "What even is that? Fake paperwork? Just a cover so you can sit here all day? Pathetic." The air grew heavy with discomfort. The other patrons sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene. The librarians behind the desk exchanged glances, but didn't yet move, as though waiting to see how far Karen would go. The man leaned back slightly in his chair, his voice steady, but edged with firmness now. "I am not obligated to justify myself to you, but I'll remind you again. I have every right to be here." Karen's face flushed red. Her voice grew sharper, louder. "No, you don't. You're loitering, and I won't stand by while someone takes advantage of this place. If the staff here won't do their jobs, then I'll make sure this is dealt with properly." Her words echoed across the quiet shelves, turning the library's calm into a stage of accusation. And with every second, her determination to drive him out only grew stronger. Karen's tote bag thudded against her hip as she spun on her heel, her indignation carrying her across the room. The quiet shuffle of pages and keystrokes gave way to a prickling silence, patrons craning their necks as she marched toward the circulation desk. Two librarians sat there, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a bun, and an older man in a cardigan, both startled by the sudden approach. Karen slapped her hand down on the counter, her voice cutting through the hushed air. "I need you to do your job," she announced, loud enough for half the library to hear. "There's a man sitting at that oak table, pretending like he belongs here. He's spreading out papers, acting like he works for the library. It's disruptive and inappropriate. I want him removed." The younger librarian blinked, caught off guard. "Removed?" she repeated softly. "Yes," Karen snapped, her voice rising again. She jabbed her finger back toward the oak table, where the black man still sat, calm and composed, quietly stacking his papers. "Him. Right there. He doesn't belong, and it's obvious. I've been coming to this library for years. Years. And I know the staff here. I've never seen him before. Don't try to tell me he's part of your team." The older librarian shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped together on the desk. His eyes flicked toward the man at the table, then back to Karen. Ma'am," he began carefully, "I think there may be some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Karen cut in, her cheeks flushing red. Her voice cracked like a whip across the room, making even the children's corner go still. "You're letting people loiter and pretend they belong, and I won't stand for it. This is a public institution, and it needs to be protected." Her words had drawn nearly everyone's attention now. A college student by the study Carol's muttered, "This is ridiculous," while a mother near the picture books clutched her child's hand a little tighter. Several patrons were already raising their phones, screens glowing as they recorded. At the oak table, the man quietly adjusted his glasses again, his face unreadable. He made no move to defend himself, no interruption to her tirade. His silence only seemed to fuel Karen's fury. "Do your jobs," Karen demanded, slapping the counter once more. "Get him out of here." Now the librarians exchanged a glance, one of quiet recognition, but also of restraint. They knew exactly who the man was. They also knew the scene wasn't finished yet. And so, they let Karen's words hang in the air, her demand echoing through the silence, while the truth waited patiently to surface. The two librarians at the desk exchanged a loaded glance, the kind of silent conversation that spoke volumes. Do we stop this now, or let it play out? Karen tapped her fingers impatiently on the counter, her tote bag sliding down her arm. Well, are you going to do something? Or are you just going to let strangers take over this place? The younger librarian straightened slightly, her lips parting as though to answer, but she hesitated. Instead, she glanced again toward the oak table. The man was still seated there, unhurried, methodically arranging his papers into neat piles. He hadn't flinched once under Karen's fury. The older librarian gave a small shake of his head, his expression calm but firm. "Ma'am," he said softly, "before we act on your complaint, we need to be absolutely sure of the facts." Karen scoffed loudly, the sound bouncing across the quiet library. "Facts? The facts are right in front of you. Look at him. He's just sitting there, taking up space, pretending he's in charge. What more proof do you need?" Patrons nearby shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. A teenager in the computer lab muttered, "This is embarrassing." A mother leaned toward her child and whispered, "Don't stare, sweetheart." But eyes lingered all the same. The younger librarian folded her hands on the desk, her gaze steady now. "I think we should be careful, Mrs. She paused, searching for Karen's name, but receiving only a glare in return. "Careful about assumptions. The gentleman at that table isn't disturbing anyone." "He's disturbing me," Karen snapped, her voice cracking sharp as glass. "And that's enough. I demand that you do your jobs. Call security if you have to, but he needs to go." At that, a murmur rippled through the crowd. The demand had tipped from irritation into outright hostility. More phones were lifted discreetly, capturing every word, every glare. The older librarian took a deep breath, his eyes steady on Karen's. "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken." Karen's face flushed, her voice rising another notch. "Mistaken? Don't you dare patronize me. I know what I see." She jabbed her finger again toward the man, who remained seated, calm as ever, a quiet pillar against her storm. The younger librarian exchanged one last glance with her colleague. It was time. The silence that had stretched long enough would now break, with the truth. Because everyone watching, whispering, recording, they deserved to know exactly who the man at the oak table really was. The tension in the library had reached a breaking point. Karen stood stiff at the counter, her face flushed with righteous indignation, tote bag clutched like a weapon. Around her, the quiet murmur of the patrons had swelled into a low buzz of whispers, and half-hidden phones angled toward the scene. Everyone waited for the librarians to act. The younger librarian drew in a breath and finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying through the hushed room. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "the man at that oak table is not loitering. He isn't a stranger." Karen threw up her hands. "Of course he's a stranger. I've been coming here for years, and I would know if he belonged. He's sitting there, like he owns the place." The older librarian's eyes softened, almost with pity. "That's because, in a way, he does." Karen blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" The younger librarian straightened her shoulders, her voice clear and steady now. "The gentleman you're pointing at is Mr. Charles Daniels. He is our head librarian." The words cut through the air like a bell. Gasps rose from the patrons scattered around the building. A student at the back whispered, "Head librarian?" A mother near the children's corner clasped her child's hand tighter, murmuring, "I knew he looked familiar." Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her indignation faltering as if someone had yanked the ground out from under her. "That," she sputtered, her face reddening deeper, "that can't be true." But the truth was undeniable. At the oak table, Mr. Daniels finally rose to his feet, calm and deliberate. He adjusted his glasses and gave the room a small, polite nod, acknowledging the attention now fixed squarely on him. His presence was steady, commanding without a word. The younger librarian continued, her tone now firm. Mr. Daniels has overseen this library for over a decade. The collections you use, the programs your children attend, the staff you rely on, all of it runs under his leadership. Without him, this library would not be what it is. A ripple of murmurs swept the room. Eyes that had followed Karen moments ago now shifted toward Mr. Daniels, their expressions filled with newfound respect. Karen, meanwhile, had gone pale beneath the flush of her outrage. Her tote bag slipped from her arm and dangled uselessly at her side. For the first time since she stormed in, she was silent. And in that silence, the balance of the library returned. Not to Karen's demands, but to the quiet authority of the man she had tried to drive out. For a long, breathless moment, the library held its silence. Dozens of eyes rested on Karen. Her indignation wilted, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The weight of her mistake hung heavy in the air, magnified by every phone camera still trained on her. Mr. Daniels stood quietly by the oak table, his posture steady, his gaze composed. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gloat, didn't match Karen's earlier fire. Instead, he offered the same calm presence that had carried him through the entire ordeal. Thank you all, he said gently, his voice resonating in the stillness. I appreciate your patience. This is a library, after all, a place for learning and for respect. The words were simple, but they carried a power that silenced even the whispers. Patrons nodded subtly, some smiling at him, others turning their eyes back to Karen, who now stood rigid with shame. Mr. Daniels turned back to his papers, carefully sliding them into his binder. He didn't look at Karen again. He didn't need to. His silence, his dignity, and his title had already said everything. The younger librarian moved from behind the desk, placing a quiet hand on Mr. Daniel's shoulder as if to anchor the moment in solidarity. The older librarian cleared his throat softly and resumed his work, as though restoring the library's natural order. Patrons returned one by one to their books, their laptops, their whispered conversations. The atmosphere settled back into calm, though now charged with the unspoken acknowledgement of what had just transpired. Karen lingered only a moment longer, her tote bag sagging in her grip. Her face was crimson, her eyes darting from the patron's disapproving stares to the man she had tried so hard to discredit. But there was no recovery, no argument left to make. Without a word, she turned on her heel and marched toward the exit. The door creaked open, the sunlight spilling across her as she disappeared into the street outside. Mr. Daniels sat down again, calmly opening his binder, adjusting his glasses, and returning to his work as if nothing had happened. The library exhaled around him, its quiet restored. Respect, once questioned, had been firmly reestablished. And Karen, for all her noise, had left with nothing but silence.